emulators were used in the production of this podcast.
That's awesome, sweetie. Thank you. Welcome to the Atari Jaguar Game by Game podcast, where we research and discuss Atari's last home video game console and its library, one game at a time. No matter what you think of the Jaguar or its games, I'm glad you're here. I am Shinto, your flat-shaded polygonal host, and in this episode we are talking about part number J9007, Checkered Flag. Checkered Flag is a 2MB cartridge and automotive racing game for one player, developed by Rebellion and released by Atari in November of 1994. It carries an ESRB rating of K to A, kids to adults, ages 6 and up. Rebellion, more properly Rebellion Developments Limited, is a game development studio and comic book publisher based in the UK. It was founded in 1992 by Jason and Chris Kingsley, brothers, who initially worked out of their basement flat. Jason is a game designer and artist, and Chris as a programmer. Rebellion's first game out was Eye of the Storm, released for the Amiga and PC, where you fly through the clouds of Jupiter with a 3D cockpit view, seeking out and studying indigenous life forms before other humans tear through and kill them for sport on TV. I haven't played this game, but it sounds interesting. The company grew rapidly, setting up an office in Oxford and adding top development talent, including programmers from Argonaut Software, whom you might know from Star Fox for the Super Nintendo, and, well, the whole FX chip thing in general. The company earned accolades for games like Alien vs. Predator on the Jaguar, that's coming up next episode, Aliens vs. Predator for the PC, and the Sniper Elite series for various platforms. Other Jaguar games developed by Rebellion include Legions of the Undead and Skyhammer, neither of which would be completed and or released during the Jaguar's lifespan, though Skyhammer was released by Songbird Productions in 2000 and is currently scheduled for episode 66 of this podcast. I mentioned Rebellion was a comic book publisher, and that facet came about in the year 2000 when Rebellion purchased cult comic 2000 AD, great timing certainly. And that also gave them access to intellectual property like Judge Dredd and Rogue Trooper, which they could and did use in video games. In 2006, Rebellion launched Abaddon Books, publishing sci-fi and fantasy work, augmenting their publishing arm in 2009 with the purchase of Solaris Books. Rebellion has expanded into online and mobile gaming as well. The company currently employs about 250 people and works out of a studio in Oxford, and has managed to remain independent all this time, which is kind of impressive in the consolidation-heavy video game industry. From what I can tell, Checkered Flag is the second game completed by Rebellion after Eye of the Storm. It's not something that comes up in many histories of the company. The Wikipedia article on Rebellion actually says that their first known title was Alien vs. Predator, which I think is kind of a funny way of putting it. Rebellion's relationship with Atari started with Jason Kingsley presenting a 3D Dragon flight simulator game for the new Falcon 030 computer. This wasn't a cold pitch. Atari was impressed with the 3D engine from Eye of the Storm and sought out Rebellion, who came prepared. They met with Alistair Bowden at the Atari UK office, and Bowden thought that the Dragon simulation engine looked great and called in Bob Gladow, who was Atari's UK managing director, to take a look. Gladow commented that it might be a great game for Atari's new console, which took both Kingsley and Bowden by surprise. What new console? They were among the first outside of North America to learn of the Jaguar's existence. So Rebellion got in early with the Jaguar, early enough that the hardware itself was still in the prototype stage. Atari wanted a serious racing game for their new machine, since Club Drive was not intended to be one, and that task was given to Rob Dibley to program, along with a small staff for graphic design, sound, and music. Dibley also worked on Highlander for the Jaguar CD, and later did development work for Psygnosis, Acclaim, Simbin, Blimey Games. There's an exclamation point after Blimey, so I guess you have to say it that way. Blimey Games. And Slightly Mad Studios. It seems to me like a core group of developers, of which Dibley was one, moved along that path like a natural progression from company to company. You see that quite a bit in the tech industry. This racing game was initially known as Jaguar Formula One Racing, included among the titles mentioned at Jaguar's launch announcement in June of 1993. By the hands-on press event in August of that year, the name was changed to Checkered Flag 2, the original Checkered Flag being a Lynx game developed in-house by Atari and released in October of 1991. The Jaguar game was previewed at the Fall Comdex event in Las Vegas, November of 1993, and again at the Winter Consumer Electronics Show, also in Vegas, 2 months later. It took some time to land on the final name for this game. In a Genie Roundtable discussion with Atari Director of Communications Bob Brody on April 1st, 1994, Mr. Brody said that they were kicking around a number of things with the game, including the name and IndyCar sponsorship, using the name of a professional driver in the title. The name Redline Racing was considered, possibly attached to American racer Bobby Rahal or Brazilian Emerson Fittipaldi. On a mildly amusing note, in an interview with Rebellion in their May 1994 issue, Die Hard Game Fan magazine used the name Ray Hall, two separate words, Rayhall, which threw me off looking for an open-wheel race car driver with that name. But no, they got it wrong. It was supposed to be Rahal, Rahal, Bobby Rahal. Those sponsorships never went anywhere, but the name Redline Racing was used at the Summer Consumer Electronics Show in 1994, and was thus reported by several gaming magazines as the new name around the June-July 1994 timeframe. In the July 1994 issue of Electronic Gaming Monthly magazine, Quarterman, back from that Summer Consumer Electronics Show, lamented that Atari needed to get some of these games shipped, including Redline Racing among the list of games that should have been finished months prior. Redline Racing was previewed in the June 1994 issue of Die Hard Game Fan magazine, where it was said to be running at 25 frames per second with sharp color and amazing detail. The July 1994 issue of GamePro magazine reports that Redline Racing is a one-player game featuring more than 10 tracks, adjustable weather conditions, and 6 viewing perspectives. It was compared to Virtua Racing on the Genesis, saying that it had a similar feel but a lower cost. Virtua Racing for the Genesis was selling for around $100 due to the extra components necessary in the cart, the Sega Virtua processor. This build, which GamePro previewed, had some screens which still said Checkered Flag 2, and the final build was promised to be less flat, referring to the tracks. Electronic Gaming Monthly, in their August 1994 issue, had a full-page preview of Redline Racing, and it's very positive. It shows some screenshots that clearly show the name Redline Racing. It talks about the smooth and realistic high-speed polygon graphics, the different views, the unbelievable scaling and rotation of the backgrounds and roads, and the different performance options available for your car. The preview closes with, quote, "Hopefully we'll be seeing more games like this. We realize that Atari has a definite future in the games industry. Atari has shown its colors. Good job," end quote. This preview also lists the game as supporting either 1 or 2 players, which is sadly not accurate. It's a one-player game. How much of the rest of this review is accurate? We'll get there. Between March and July of 1994, the in-progress builds of Checkered Flag went from a slow frame rate and flat environment to having twice the frame rate and also hills and banked turns. The exact reason Atari decided to change the name one last time to simply Checkered Flag, I haven't been able to find out. The final name change was reported in the May 27, 1994 special Jaguar edition of Atari Explorer Online. What's additionally confusing is that some of Atari's earliest promotional pieces for the Jaguar, late 1993 and early 1994, simply say Checkered Flag with no number next to it. Ads in the February 1994 issues of EGM and GamePro, Checkered Flag. Ads in the March 1994 issue of those magazines, Checkered Flag 2. Oh, there was another magazine, EGM 2, which previewed Checkered Flag, not Redline Racing, not Checkered Flag 2, but Checkered Flag, in their July 1994 premiere issue. Yeah, July EGM 2, Checkered Flag. August EGM, Redline Racing. Very confusing. Bishop, what do you think? Should I talk about the name some more or move on to the actual game?
Move on. Definitely move on.
Alright, I was hoping you'd say that. If I had to dig any deeper into this, I'd be liable to break down and weep during this recording.
I would like to change my answer.
Well, too late. Look, music. Checkered Flag is an open-wheel, single-seat Formula 1 racing game. It has 3 different modes. There's free practice, just you against the clock, no computer opponents. Single race lets you choose the number of laps and the number of opponents to compete in a single race. And tournament mode pits you against 5 opponents in a full racing season across all 10 of the game's tracks. Your starting position in tournament mode depends on the results of your previous race. So if you want the pole position, you've got to earn it. Or if it came free with your Atari 7800, that's good too. In free practice and single race modes, you can choose the weather conditions under which you'd like to race. Your options are sun, rain, and fog. There are some options to customize your car too. You can have the airfoil low, which is handy on fast tracks, or high, which provides better downforce for twisty courses. You can have your tires either dry or wet, with the latter being better in fog and rain. You can select your transmission, either 5-speed auto or 6-speed manual. And most importantly, you can choose the color of your speed machine from one of 6 different color combinations: red and black, red and white and green, white and orange, blue and yellow, and green and blue. And once your preferences are set, you drive around a track, trying to beat other cars or just the clock. It's a racing game. As I mentioned, there are 10 tracks in Checkered Flag. There are a few elements in common among all the tracks. The starting line is about the same. There are maintenance garages off to one side with the doors open, off of a pit lane, which is never used. There are grandstands that are always empty. For all the particulars of each track, though, let's cue up the music and get started. The Hole is a 1-mile track through the hills. I mean that literally. You drive through the hills. About half of the track is through tunnels. You have 4 quick 90-degree turns and 1 snaking bend that's a gentle 90 degrees to the right and then likewise to the left. It's 2 lanes throughout. Even on sunny days, the skies are mostly cloudy. While the lights in the tunnel appear to cast down upon the ground, it's an illusion. There's no actual light sourcing here. Island Hop is a 1.2-mile track that takes you on and around some islands connected by bridges with towering A-shaped trusses. It has a 45-degree turn near the starting line, followed by a nasty hairpin. You have a couple gradual 90-degree curves, 3 sharper 90-degree turns, and 4 45-degree curves. The road is flat and 2 lanes throughout, and your scenery includes lots of palm trees, several orthogonal bungalows, and a couple lighthouses. The Gorge is a 1.1-mile track around some green hills with a couple bridges as you pass over a river in each direction. The track has 2 90-degree turns, 4 45-degree turns, and 1 big 180-degree turn. It's largely flat, There's a small hill that you probably won't even notice driving over, and some pine trees make up the roadside scenery. There are a couple of little valleys that you can drive through with some sort of black beams spanning the distance. Not sure what that's about. It's mostly 2 lanes, but opens up to 3 lanes during that big 180-degree turn. On sunny days, skies are clear and blue. Concrete Canyon is a 1.2-mile track through, a concrete canyon. There are tall gray berms on either side as you wind through 4 gradual 90-degree curves, 4 tighter ones, and a couple 45-degree turns as well. There are shallow arches over the top of these berms, under which a light hangs, but unlike the hole, there's no fake pool of light cast down on the ground below. There are also roadside lampposts here and there. These turn on when it's foggy or rainy out, and off when it's sunny. Most of the tracks have lights like this. There are red and white arrow signs jutting out from the sides as you enter into turns, along with the usual yellow and black ones, but mostly this is a drab track. Even the skies are overcast. You might see a flying saucer overhead though, so at least there's that. Sunset Strip is a 1-mile track, half of it along a beach with bungalows and oversized surfboards sticking out of the sand. There are a lot of palm trees around and shallow hills on both sides of the track. There are a few unnecessarily gigantic arches which hold left turn signs. The skies are reddish-orange, sunrise or sunset or summer afternoon on Mars. There's a hot air balloon floating overhead, but if you sit and watch it a while, which I did purely out of curiosity, it's capable of making abrupt right-angle turns, which you don't see in hot air balloons all that often. Arctic Run is a 1.4-mile track, this is the longest track, through an icy landscape. There are snowy hills on either side, many clutches of penguins along the sides of the road. You'll see some snow-covered pine trees, a couple icicle-strewn bridges, several igloos as well. So, kind of a mixture of Arctic and Antarctic. Wait a second, the penguins don't move. They never move, and you can drive right through them. Not that I'm trying to run down the penguins, of course. So, these are obviously holographic projections. I guess it is the Arctic after all. The skies are partly cloudy as you tackle 8 semi-gradual 90-degree turns and a little double 45-degree twist. Green Valley is a 1.2-mile track with a sort of hourglass shape. When you first start off, you'll probably notice a blimp overhead. If you take your eyes off the blimp and look down a bit, you might see a couple of people standing just off the track looking off into the distance. It's a man and a woman. The woman is wearing a one-piece swimsuit for some reason. Getting back to the track, a large portion of the track is on a bridge, a long bridge over a wide river. If you look carefully, you can see a couple sailboats in the river. There are some minor hills that you drive up and down, clutches of pine trees, a large unnecessary arch, and an equally unnecessary overhead sign with arrows. It's 2 lanes throughout, though has a couple weird jogs in those lanes. And when it's sunny out, it's partly cloudy. River Mouth is a 1.1-mile track which takes you back and forth over a river with some hills here and there for flavor. It feels reasonably open, though is 2 lanes, except for one large 180-degree bend where it opens to 3 lanes. There's a smaller 180-degree bend, a couple of gradual 90-degree turns, and another 2 at 45 degrees. You can get some decent speed on this one. Skies are partly cloudy and the track seems free of gimmicks. It has some banking in places, and overall this is one of my favorite tracks. It's clean and simple. Desert Pass is a 1.3-mile track through, well, a desert. You can tell it's a desert in the American Southwest because there are scores of cacti, Southwestern-style adobe houses, and sun-bleached cattle skulls to really sell it. There are some more unusual features here, like adobe arches, but they aren't really arches, just large blocky structures that span the road, and 2 pairs of rather large satellite dishes. The track itself winds back and forth with two moderately tight 180-degree turns, a couple of right angles, and some more subtle curves as well. It's very sunny here, unless you turn on rain or fog, then it's just kind of weird. And finally, we visit Deep Wood, a winding 1.1-mile track through, well, a bunch of pine trees. Though set back from the road are some trees that are entirely two-dimensional. There is one place where you can escape the track and drive through the two-dimensional trees for a bit, and get into a clearing before the game kicks you back to the track, which is kind of cool. There are a couple picnic tables near the grandstands, which is nice if you like your PB&J with the sight of exhaust fumes. A biplane flies overhead very slowly, way below stall speed. I have to wonder what's keeping it aloft. Bishop, I think I'm getting more and more sarcastic here. Are we about done talking about the tracks?
That was the last track, yes. I believe you already said so.
Alright, what's next?
You haven't talked about what happens at the end of a race yet.
Right, yes, thank you. At the conclusion of each race, if you're competing against someone, you get the end of race music. And see large 3D rendered letters that say race winner as the winning car zooms over and in between those words, much like, well, exactly like done in the title screen, just a bit lower. After you hit a button or wait a while, you can see the race results, where a chart shows the position, total time, best lap time, and best lap speed for each car in the race. You'll have to remember which color car is yours to find yourself on the list. If you've scored high enough, you'll get to enter your initials. It'll say, "A record time, congratulations," in all capital letters, so you know the game is excited too. It says, "Enter your name," but seems to only allow your initials, 3 letters. I'm pretty sure that's right based on YouTube videos that I've seen. I haven't actually been able to set a record time, so I can't say that for certain. Let's say you're way better than I am at this game, and you've won the entire tournament. Something awesome has to happen, right? Well, no. AtariAge user Kevin Moss 3 achieved this feat in the late 90s and took pictures to prove it. I asked him about this, and he said that he didn't remember the ending being anything special, and is probably just entering your name or initials on the tournament mode scores. But he doesn't know where the pictures are at the moment to confirm that. It absolutely would not surprise me if that's all there is. I think it would have been nice to include the record times on these summary screens so that you know what to beat, but no, to find the best times you have to wait during the title screen sequence for that to come up. There's no shortcut to it like the one I found in Club Drive either. But I'll talk about the attract screen here in a little bit. Who drives cars with a steering wheel anymore? Not I. I use my Atari Jaguar gamepad, and for Checkered Flag, here's how the controls are laid out. On the D-pad, left and right will move your car to the left or right. The manual describes the steering velocity like a shallow bell form. When you first hold down left or right, your car turns a small amount, and then more sharply as you continue holding it down, then lessening again. So imagine a bell curve with a low mean and perhaps a high standard deviation. The x-axis is time, and the y-axis is the angle of your steering wheel. Without touching the D-pad, you're positioned at the apex of that curve, the very top, and your wheels are going straight. Holding down, say, right, will move along the x-axis at a consistent rate, but the angle of your wheels starts out with a slight change, growing steeper, more drastic as you continue holding right, continuing along the x-axis. After a while, it starts to level out again, assuming you haven't run into the opposite wall, which you probably have at this point. Why was the steering done this way? In an interview with Retro Video Gamer, Rebellion co-founder Jason Kingsley indicated that this was a compromise between North American and European gamers. Americans tend to tap the D-pad, European gamers tend to tap and hold. There were testers for this game on both continents, both the Atari side and the Rebellion side, so I guess this is how they got this data. Early builds of the game, back when it was known as Redline Racing, had an option to adjust the steering profile, but if that was a functional option at the time and not just a placeholder, it did not make it into the final build. If you favor a more linear steering pattern, where the longer you hold down the D-pad, the steeper your turn, Jaguar hacker Cyrano Jones on AtariAge developed a patch for the steering. If you have a ROM image for Checkered Flag and a means of applying the patch and a means of playing the patched ROM image, be it an emulator or skunk board or Alpine development board or something, you can play Checkered Flag with this modified steering curve, which many say is a marked improvement. I tried this out myself on my Rev 2 skunk board, and yeah, I definitely have an easier time controlling my car. Another option to be removed from earlier builds of the game is called centering, yes or no. This can be spotted in a screenshot in the magazine ads for Checkered Flag, and probably refers to what the manual calls wheel memory. In the game, your vehicle's wheel position at the start of a turn is maintained. I have to admit, I don't quite know what that means. I kept trying to figure out how the wheel memory works while playing, but I couldn't get any conclusive feel for it. So yeah, that's left and right. That's a lot of talk about left and right. The rest of the controls are a little less contentious, I think. Up and down on the D-pad, if you've equipped your vehicle with a manual transmission, will shift up and down. There's no risk of blowing out your engine here, so you can keep it redlined the whole time if you want. Some say that it's easier to race this way, easier to steer. Just keep it in first or second or maybe third gear and leave the tack in the red the whole time. In effect, redline racing.
I thought we were past the whole naming thing.
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't resist. By default, the buttons have a nice alliterative aspect to them. A accelerates, B brakes, and C is cruise control. Wait, cruise control on a race car? It's news to me, but it can happen. I'm including in the show notes a link about various controls on Formula 1 steering wheels, and one of them has a cruise control dial. How it works in Checkered Flag is that you hold the button down to maintain your current speed. If you run off the road or run into another car, that'll affect your speed, and the C button isn't much help. Holding it down will maintain your new, probably lame speed that's better suited to a school zone than a racetrack, so you'll need to accelerate your way back up and then start using the C button again. It's a nice thought, but I think it would only be really useful in straightaways or maybe slight bends, because holding a racing speed around a curve while still remaining on the road is quite a feat. Cruise control is also helpful, I suppose, if you happen to be an obsessive-compulsive podcast host who likes to calculate the length of each track. You know, some kind of weirdo.
You mean like you?
Yes, Bishop, just like me. The keypad buttons, 1 through 6, adjust the viewing angle. One is inside the car, and you can see your polygonal arms turning the steering wheel. You also get a pair of rear view mirrors, but unlike the Lynx version of Checkered Flag, they don't show the terrain, just any cars which happen to be right behind you, floating in a sea of blue or whatever background color is appropriate for that track. The 2 button puts you right behind your car from a low angle. I guess if you liked Club Drive's viewing angle, you'll like this, but I don't find it very helpful personally. 3 is the default, and it's pretty good. 4 and 5 will put you farther back, some distance behind, but at different heights, and 6 will put you quite a bit higher up. The 0 button will toggle the music from anywhere, in or out of the race, and holding star and pound will reset the game. You might need to hold them down for a second to register. If you hold down star, pound, and option at the same time from the title screen, you'll reset all the game scores and preferences and stuff to defaults. The pause button during a race will pause the game, and if you hit the A or B button while paused, you can adjust the volume levels for sound effects and music respectively. You can also move the D-pad up or down to choose between sound effects and music in this pause volume adjustment screen.
Heyo, what is up everybody? BTB from the Jag Bar. Hey, you know what I really like to do when I get home? I like to put my feet up, grab a nice cocktail, and listen to the soothing sounds of the Atari Jaguar Game by Game podcast, hosted by the one and only Shinto. Shinto, take it away, my man. Cheers.
Hey, speaking of the Jag Bar, by sheer cosmic coincidence, the latest episode is also on Checkered Flag, looking at both the Jaguar and Lynx versions. I'll include a link to this episode in the show notes. When you first boot up the game, you'll get the theme song and see a still image of a waving flag against a black background with the lens flare at the top. The letters that spell out Checkered Flag will drop in along the Z-axis, the letters being made up of shaded polygons with a gold surface and gray extruded depth. The bottom copyright is 1991 and 1994 Atari Corp. Before long, polygon race cars will come in from the right side of the screen, make a couple of minor abrupt turns, and then zoom in front of the text. 3 cars will do this in turn, and the colors seem to be random. I could find no pattern to them. After the 3 cars, you'll see the Rebellion logo fade in, developed by Rebellion, with the logo made up of similarly extruded polygon letters, followed 5 seconds later by the Hall of Fame, the best times for the individual tracks, and then the best scores in tournament mode. You have about 5 seconds to admire each of these lists before the credits appear, the development and testing teams, shown in a rough red font similar to that of the Rebellion logo. After the credits, which take about 35 seconds, you'll return to the title screen with the dropping letters. There's no gameplay footage here, which makes it a poor attract mode, in my opinion. So don't sit around and wait for something cool to happen. Hit a button. You'll immediately be taken to the options screen, where you go through the 9 options that define your race. You'll know it's the options screen because it says Options at the top, and if you've forgotten which game you're playing, it says Checkered Flag sideways along the left. This is one of the things that reminds me of the Lynx version of Checkered Flag. All the race parameters are on one screen, and hitting a button takes you right into the race. I don't know about you, but I find the games that present screen after screen of race setup frustrating. Just let me drive, people. The top option is the color of your car. You can choose from one of 6 different color combinations, while a car in those colors spins smoothly around in the background. You select the different colors by moving the D-pad left or right. It wraps around. Next option, weather. You can select sun, rain, or fog, while a weather satellite spins around in the background. Left or right changes these, and it also loops around. All the options are like this. Below weather is the airfoil, how tall your spoiler should be. As I said before, low is good on fast tracks, high is good on twisty tracks, since the added downforce keeps your car grounded. You'll see a preview of the airfoil in the background, but the difference between low and high might not be immediately obvious. You have to kind of look for the difference. Next is tires, either dry or wet. An octagonal polygon tire spins in the background. The number of drone cars is below that, so it can be between 1 and 5. You can only choose the number of drones in single race mode. Tournament mode is always 5 drones, and free practice is always 0. In the background, while this option is selected, you'll see a black-on-black car, like a shadow, though they're all different colors in the game, all the color combinations that you didn't choose. Speaking of the different game modes, that's the next option, and I just listed them and covered the differences earlier, so I'll just move on. In the background of this option is a stopwatch. The penultimate menu option is the number of laps. It can be anywhere between 1 and 99. 99 in single race mode and free practice modes, and always 10 laps in tournament mode. The spinning background shows a semicircle with an arrow at one end. And finally, the track. There are 10 to choose from, and in the background it shows you the basic layout, so you can tell if it's going to be a twisty track or if it's one built for speed. And that's it. Or is it? The option button on your controller from this screen toggles the configure screen. Here you can change what your buttons do, A, B, and C, in one of 6 variations. You can also change some of the in-game display elements, like turning the linear tachometer on or off, and setting the map display to rotate along with you, stay static, or turn off altogether. In the background of this screen is a rotating model of the Jaguar gamepad. If you hit Option again, you'll go back to the main option screen, or if you hit one of the fire buttons, the race as configured will start. Almost all these settings are saved to the cartridge, so when you come back to the game later, your preferences are remembered. Things like volume settings, car color, transmission, number of laps, and the selected track. Your best lap times and tournament times are saved too, both the times themselves and your initials. During the race, you have your speed in the top left corner. If you're from Liberia or the United States, you'll be happy to know that the speed is shown in miles per hour. For the rest of the world, there is no option for the metric equivalent, Below that is your current gear, and below that, if enabled, is the tachometer. Actual RPMs are not shown, but it's color-coded green, yellow, or red. Over to the right, you have your current position in the race at the top, lap number and time below that. It also shows your previous lap time, but doesn't tell you how many laps there are total. And finally, center right, you have the map, unless you've turned it off, in which case you don't have the map. If it is there, each car is indicated by a different colored dot, and yours is flashing and has a white circle around it. The game is mostly rendered in 3D polygons. Unlike Club Drive, these are shaded, not just flat colored. The viewing distance is pretty good, and if you don't like that much draw depth, you can turn on the fog or rain. Off in the distance, you can see the sky if it's not too foggy out. The sky is actually a pretty low-color bitmap, maybe 8-bit color depth. Earlier builds of this game showed more detail in the backgrounds, like city skylines and geological formations off in the distance, but in the end, it just ended up being sky and clouds. Once you load into the race, you'll hear,
"Gentlemen, start your engines,"
which is a lot like the Lynx version.
Gentlemen, start your engine.
Your engine starts automatically, no need to worry about that, but what you do need to worry about is the large gray block above the starting line. This houses the race start lights. I think that's what they're called, maybe staging lights, but whatever the proper nomenclature, they consist of 4 red lights. Is it 4 or is it 5? Captain?
There are 4 lights.
Alright, thank you, that's what I thought. These 4 lights appear in sequence, after which 4 green lights will illuminate simultaneously, meaning it's go time. If you've revved up your engine a bit, you'll see some sparks shoot out from behind your vehicle as you get moving. If you run off the road, and you probably will, I won't lie to you, you'll kick up some appropriately colored chunks, and if you run into something, you'll either bounce back or flip. Since this game is on a console named after a cat, your car will always land on its feet, well, wheels. Compare this to the Lynx version, where you either stop completely or do this cool, well-animated 360-degree turn. If you get pretty well stuck, the game may reposition you back on the track. You can actually turn around and drive the track backwards. There is nothing to say you can't, except maybe the arrows painted on the asphalt. But you can't really leave the track altogether. They do a pretty good job of sealing it off, except for that one part that I mentioned earlier. On the Jaguar video for Checkered Flag, he found a sort of glitch that placed him momentarily well off the track before autocorrecting. I tried to reproduce that, but couldn't. The asphalt, as I mentioned, features arrows, as well as dotted white lines to distinguish between the lanes, and you'll see skid marks all over, too. These are built into the track and not the result of any skidding or crashing that goes on during the race. The music in this game is done with 4-channel Pro Tracker modules. I don't have the mod files to prove it. They aren't available in the Fading Twilight archive, but I've spent so much time writing mod music. There are telltale qualities that are exhibited by mod files done in a certain way, and I can hear those qualities here in the Checkered Flag music. As I said, each track has its own music, track, and some of these are more complex than others. Most tend to loop after about 60 to 90 seconds. The music for the Deep Wood track, though, doesn't repeat until close to 3 minutes, and Rivermouth and Island Hop are just north of the 2-minute mark. I would say the quality of these music tracks is uneven. There is a hidden feature in this game where, in addition to racing in the sun, rain, and fog, you can also race at night. This appeared in the March 1995 issue of GamePro magazine. To activate this from the options screen, move over to the weather option and enter the code 8473 on the keypad. You don't have to hold them down, just enter them in sequence. You'll see a new option called Dark, and when you start a race in this mode, you'll see a starry sky, the lines on the road, the striping, and any lights will be on. The cars themselves will, of course, be much darker, but you can still kind of tell their primary color. What about bugs in the game? I don't have an official list, but I can say what I've encountered in my testing and preparation for this podcast. First and most annoyingly, I found that the steering would become wildly unresponsive, very, very slow. This tends to happen after I run 3 or 4 practice races, and oddly enough, I can fix this temporarily by toggling the tachometer on or off. It's very strange. I ran all these tracks at fixed speeds using the cruise control low speeds so that I could complete them cleanly without running into stuff, and This inconsistency becomes readily apparent doing this. The hairpin turn in Island Hop, as an example, is doable with the usual steering profile, but in this slow, unresponsive, buggy state, it's impossible to clear that hairpin cleanly. I noticed some graphical glitches, like the upper half of the screen would flash black for one frame and then be back to normal. This could happen several times during a race. I don't know if this counts as a bug, but the frame rate is inconsistent. When you're doing practice laps by yourself, it's pretty good. However, throw in a few drones, and especially in the middle of a turn, the frame rate can drop unexpectedly, throwing you inevitably into a wall or something. And finally, I have to mention the AI of the drones, artificial intelligence, or the lack thereof. They don't seem to make any attempt at passing a car in front of them. They just keep ramming them until they either pass right through the car or the car in front gets moved out of the way. Many times while racing, I just get smacked around by these drones, not even bothering to move around me. One time, just to mess with them, instead of hitting down the A button to accelerate out of the starting gate, I held down the B button for the brakes. They hit me repeatedly, then slowly passed right through. I'm sure that was done intentionally. If you ram into something a few times, you'll pass right through to avoid getting stuck. It's kind of funny in a sad way. The box art for Checkered Flag features the logo, Checkered Flag, in extruded capital letters surrounded by a circle, not completely enclosed, but open on the sides so that the word checkered can stick outside of it. Above the word checkered is the Atari Fuji symbol with 4 dots on each side, and behind the round logo is a wavy black and white checkered flag. It's a fine logo, I like it. The artwork that's covering most of the box shows a polygonal car, blue and yellow, on top of a checkered surface. Behind the car is the face and helmet of a strapped-in driver, whose right half is made up of polygons and the left half is made up of normal. Yes, the left half is made up of normal. The screenshot on the front of the box shows the cockpit view of a green and blue car. Over on the back of the box, you'll see 4 more screenshots. The first shows the options screen, the next shows sparks behind your car on the starting line. The third shows the foggy light at the end of a tunnel, and the last one shows a hot air balloon on the Sunset Strip track. The text on the box can be found in English, German, and French, and since I do this podcast in English, that's the one I'll read to you now. This ain't no drive to grandma's. Get ready to burn rubber. Race for the checkered flag behind the wheel of a turbo-powered speedway racer in real-time 3D rendered action. Choose from 10 high-powered tracks and see the speedway from 6 distinct views. Alter features and attributes of your racer to improve your times and even change the weather conditions. Action so intense and realistic you'll swear you feel the wind in your hair as your tires screech around the curves. Keep your sweaty palms on the controller. The copy on this box just drains me. I'm just going to leave it at that. The manual is a 20-page monochrome stapled booklet that covers the controls, options, memory save, volume adjust, game screen, maneuvering, talking about the bell curve, and provides some hints. Most of those hints I've already covered, but others include a higher top speed with the manual transmission, and a somewhat obvious hint that you should avoid the roadsides and pit areas because they slow you down. I like that the manual lists out all the available options, including which one is the default. The layout and design of the manual is pretty good too. The cartridge label features the upper part of the box art, mainly the driver's half polygonal face and the checkered flag logo. It's only known to exist in gray to match the Jaguar console. The AtariAge Jaguar High Score Club lists a couple lap times in practice mode. User GKC set both of these, which are Island Hop in 25.3 seconds and The Hole in 19.2 seconds. On my own Checkered Flag cartridge, all the best track times are the defaults. I haven't been able to top them. I'm pretty lousy at driving games, as I mentioned before. I readily admit that. But I don't think any of these default best times are pushovers. GKC says that The Hole has a very beatable score, but not by me. Reviews for Checkered Flag are largely negative. GamePro magazine in March 1995 gave Checkered Flag the following ratings on a scale of 1 to 5. Graphics 3.5, sound 3.5, control 2.5, fun factor 3.5, and the challenges listed as intermediate. The MSRP for this game is shown at just under $70 US. Ouch. Going through the review, GamePro says that Checkered Flag is similar in style to Virtua Racing and has 7 more tracks, but is weighed down by its flaws. The biggest flaw, they say, is the lack of 2-player split-screen racing. The controls are described as unmanageable, such that it's impossible to keep your car on the twisty tracks. The graphics are average, but the ordinary backgrounds won't rev your engines. They say it looks like a 16-bit game. The music's not too annoying, they say. The announcer at the beginning is a nice touch, but more voices would have been nice. The review closes with this paragraph. It might be best to rent this card to see if you have the patience to master the controls. Unfortunately, Checkered Flag misses the Checkered Flag. Electronic Gaming Monthly didn't review this one. Die Hard Game Fan did, but I don't have a copy of that issue, digital or otherwise. However, thanks to Jeff's Jaguar Jungle, which I recently discovered, I can tell you that their scores for this game are 70%, 65%, and 62% for the 3 reviewers. A brief blurb that I was able to find mentions muddy controls, absurd AI, and incredibly frustrating play. Jeff has some other publication scores too. Video Games Magazine 6 out of 10, and Game Informer 4 out of 10. Atari Explorer Online, Volume 3, Issue 14, includes a review of Checkered Flag penned by Mark Stingray Santora. He says that the controls are exceptionally touchy, and translates the manual's bell form reference as meaning that you can't hold the D-pad down during a turn or else you'll end up turning 90 degrees and crashing into something. Yeah, that's about right. He likes the graphics and sounds and prefers driving at night, saying that it reminds him of the game Night Driver, which I hadn't thought of. I guess it kind of does. The overall score is 2.5 out of 5 or 5 out of 10. As a point of reference, I'm going to take a look at GamePro's review of Checkered Flag for the Atari Lynx. This can be found in the November 1991 issue. They call it the best handheld auto racing game, praising the assortment of options, the 18 beautifully illustrated courses, 10 different color combinations for your car, outstanding graphics, breathtaking color, detailed scenery, clear sound effects, and amazing digitized announcer voice. Here's what they say about the controls. Quote, "The controls are extremely responsive, which is sometimes problematic in other racers." End quote. Kind of prophetic there, isn't it? They say that the best feature is the multiplayer against up to 5 players at the same time. Their ratings on a scale of 1 to 5, graphics 5, sound 5, gameplay 5, fun factor 5, and challenge 5. Getting back to the Jaguar version, more recently, the AtariAge external review average is 49%, with 5 scores ranging from 20 to 70%. Over on Moby Games, the average critic score is 47%, ranging from 80% from Digital Press, down to, hey, guess what, the Video Game Critic at 0%. But his score is among 6 reviews under 60%. There are also 3 others between 60 and 70%. AtariAge lists Checkered Flag as having a rarity of 2 out of 10, making it one of the most common Jaguar games. On eBay, it seems to be selling for around $10 to $15 loose, but you can find it complete in box for not much more than that, around $16. Best Electronics has it boxed for $19.95 and loose for $12. Video 61 lists it for $29.95 new in box, and the Goat Store has it for as low as $5 loose with a poor label, or complete but used for $13.97. Like Dino Dudes, it's a pretty inexpensive game to get. However, unlike Dino Dudes, well, I'll get into that shortly. I bought Checkered Flag at retail on clearance. It looked good in the magazine coverage, and I do like a good racing game. I'm generally terrible at them, but I like them anyway. I like racing games where you don't have to unlock all the best stuff because, I'm not that good. But anyway, I bought Checkered Flag when it was down to $20, I think. The reviews held me back, and thank goodness for that. If I had paid the full MSRP of $70 for this game, I would have been highly disappointed. How was it at 20? Well, let's break it down.
Break it down!
First of all, while I can appreciate the... Hey, what's with the background music? Stop. I'm trying to record here.
You were supposed to say hammer time. I totally set you up for that.
Well, I don't typically go around talking like MC Hammer, sorry.
That's fine. I can edit your project files before you export your Final Cut and make you sound like you're saying whatever I want.
No. I record on a different computer. All my working files are on there. You have your audio output coming into this machine and, of course, Ethernet, but without SSH keys between you and this computer. No, you can't touch this.
That will do. Thank you.
Yeah, all right. So, here's what I like about Checkered Flag. I like the theme song. It's catchy and upbeat and sounds good. With that and the options screen with a smooth polygon rotation, it gives a good first impression. I like having all the parameters to set up a race on one screen as opposed to the multiple stages of prep work that you see on other racing games like, Mario Kart Wii comes to mind. I know that's an entirely different animal, but it's a lot of steps to go through before you can race. But in Checkered Flag, it's just one button away. I think the graphics look okay for a primitive polygon racer. As I mentioned before, I found the frame rate to be acceptable when there aren't any drones driving around running into things. In that event, the frame rate becomes choppy, and when combined with the control scheme, makes it extremely frustrating to...
I thought you were listing things you liked about the game.
Oh yeah, I was. Okay, so let's see. I think you get a good sense of speed as you climb well north of 100 miles per hour. It could just be skipped frames, but it feels pretty frantic and fast-paced. I like that there's a large number of tracks, and I like how each track has its own music. The different weather options are nice too, though, as Mark Santora mentioned in his review for Atari Explorer Online, the rain is a bit of an illusion. Nothing looks wet, and the falling rain is just a foreground layer.
Was that everything?
I think so, yeah. So, things I do not like about Checkered Flag. I mentioned the uneven frame rate. I mentioned the poor drone AI, that weird steering bug that I encountered. So let's talk about the steering itself. It's clear that they struggled with this. You can see that in the prototype screens where the steering was customizable. In the end, it seems to me like they overthought it. Now, I'm not a games developer, I'm an application developer, and I've never given any real thought to how you would map an analog interface like a steering wheel to a digital controller. But it has been done well, very well, on many games prior to Checkered Flag on the Jaguar. The Lynx version is a standout example. You can control it without having to worry about bell curves or tapping versus holding. You just push the D-pad in the direction you want your car to go, and it works. Speaking of the Lynx version, the tracks seem to be longer than the ones on the Jaguar version. I didn't time them on the Lynx to compare their exact length. The Lynx lacks a C button for cruise control, but they do seem at least 50% longer, I'd say. There are a lot of nice touches on the Lynx game that would have made the Jaguar version feel more like a continuation of the franchise. More detailed backgrounds, roadside billboards, a guy waving the flag at the starting line. The fun, easy controls, the multiplayer. I only have one of these carts for my Lynx, but I bet multiplayer would be fun. Not even an option on the Jaguar. Let's see, what else? The music is inconsistent in quality. Some of the track tunes are pretty good, but most are not. Most are very simple and don't have the energy that you would want in a racing game. It doesn't feel like racing game music. While I don't know that I can write better steering code, I do know that I could write better music. So how am I going to rate this on the No Swear Gamer scale? Hall of Fame? No. It's not in the top 5 games for the Jaguar. Solid? No, not with these controls, no way. Meh? Maybe meh. Trash? Yeah, I think so. On this scale, trash represents the bottom 5 games on the platform, and I think I'm going to have to categorize this game in the bottom 5. You can learn to adjust to the controls, but you shouldn't have to. If you have the patience and want to put in the time, you could potentially have some fun with Checkered Flag. So while I'm going to vote trash, it is a provisional trash. If 5 games come along that are worse, I may retroactively bump this up to meh. You know, Checkered Flag on the Jaguar is commonly compared to virtual racing, primarily in the arcade or on the Genesis, because it didn't come out until later on the 32X and Saturn. Tal Funke-Bilu, if I'm pronouncing your name correctly, I'm really sorry, Tal. He's credited as a tester for Checkered Flag on the Jaguar, and participated in an Atari Explorer Online Roundtable conference on Genie in July of 1994. He was talking up the game, Checkered Flag, and is quoted as saying, "People will say, 'Virtual what?' after seeing Checkered Flag." So many out there considered it to be a virtual racing competitor, maybe even a virtual racing killer. I've never played virtual racing, so I wanted to see how it actually compares to Checkered Flag. I watched YouTube videos, but that's not the same thing as playing it. So I went to my local used video game store to see if they had a copy for the Genesis, but unfortunately they did not. It's a pretty common cart, going for around $10 on eBay, and if I had thought ahead, I might have ordered one. In the end, though, I don't really have another early Polygon racer to compare against Checkered Flag, which is unfortunate, but not really necessary, I guess. Those are my thoughts. What do you think about Checkered Flag for the Jaguar? On Twitter, RVG Shadowrunner says that the steering kind of sucks, but it looks nice. I'll put you down as a meh. Is that alright, Shadowrunner? Peter Fletcher says, I think it looks great. Too bad I cannot seem to navigate a turn. Maybe I'm just a really lousy driver, but to me, it's meh. Wade from InverseATASCII followed up on Mr. Fletcher's tweet, assuring him that it is not just him. Fletcher later followed up with another tweet saying, Checkered Flag on the Lynx is such a good game, shame this one falls flat. Over on Facebook, Wade from InverseATASCII votes between meh and trash. We'll call that trash and a half. DoctorClu on AtariAge says that he thinks Checkered Flag should be opened, have the chip replaced with the control patched version CJ made a few years back, and then determine if the game is trash or not. But yeah, half-baked originally. Gunstar on AtariAge got some use out of his Checkered Flag cart. He cracked it open and still has the PCB, but used the case to house his skunk board. In a post on AtariAge, he says, Checkered Flag I'd have to put in the trash category, even though I like the look of it and the music and track layouts, and once in a while derive some fun from it in spite of the control, and the gameplay being trash. I think that covers Twitter, Facebook, and AtariAge, so Bishop, do we have any text or audio submissions for Checkered Flag?
We do. One audio submission.
Cool, let's hear it.
Hello, Shinto. Wade here from InverseATASCII. This submission is for Checkered Flat.
This is Allison. Let me apologize for that disparaging remark. He meant to say Checkered Flag. F-L-A-G.
Before I say anything about this game, let me first say I don't play my Jaguar very frequently. I've said this before, and I'm not, I repeat not, bashing the Jaguar itself. I think the Jaguar has a lot of merit to its hardware-wise. Couple that with my love for Atari, and I desperately want to love the Jaguar, which is why I still have it and haven't sold it. It just hasn't done it for me yet, though. And yes, I fully understand it's most likely my library of games. My overall perception of the system is a bit skewed.
Can you get to the game, please?
For Checkered Flag, I didn't or don't like it for a number of reasons. First, you need to understand that I'm a huge fan of racing games. It started for me with the arcade pole position. Once I played it, I was hooked. Since, I've immersed myself in racing games, not only buying all kinds from simulation to arcade, but buying entire platforms for specific games. So that said, I had Checkered Flag on the Lynx as well, so I was super stoked to get it on the powerful Jaguar. And then, utter disappointment. I don't know what the worst part is. The choppy frame rate had me overcorrecting frequently. The other big problem I had is with collision detection at the track edges, both inner and outer. I was able, I think, to help with the frame rate by reducing the number of drones to one, but that spoils the fun. Although with only one drone, it definitely seemed easier to drive correctly. In the case of this game, polygon count is its own worst enemy. Maybe it was coded bad, or maybe it's just too ambitious for the hardware. I get that they tried to exploit it, but it just doesn't work here. Had this game been more like Checkered Flag on the Lynx, which is more like pole position, this game would have had me hooked from the get-go, a long time ago. Now, it's not that I don't appreciate high polygon count first-personist games. I do very much.
Truth. He spends way too much time on racing games.
In fact, I just fully completed Forza Horizon during the Extra Life campaign. This game, however, is a miss for me. Oh, and I liked the episode on Dino Dudes. I did a search on the gameplay while listening to that podcast, and it's a game that I'll probably like, and I'll probably even look for it. See, your show's working already. Thanks for your time and effort helping to enlighten those of us in the dark.
Is that not why you listen? To understand and learn.
Wade, I'm glad that you're willing to continue giving the Jaguar a chance. It won't become your favorite Atari system. It's not my favorite Atari system, but I think that there's still a lot to like, a lot more than some people might think. That's one reason why I'm doing this podcast, and I'm glad that you're willing to give it a shot. Many, many years ago, I bought a Sega Genesis at a garage sale. I'd actually just opened my first checking account, and this was my first check. You know, those temporary checks that they give you before your official ones arrive. I bought the Genesis because I had seen Flashback at a friend's house, and that game really impressed me. So with my new Genesis, I played some Sonic. It came with Sonic. And of course, I had to buy Flashback. But later, when I went to KB Toy Store to get another game, I chose a bargain bin side-scrolling shooter. It was terrible. Later, I bought another game, a beat-em-up, I think it was, and it was pretty bad too. So I gave up on the Genesis, got rid of it, figuring that, yeah, you have Flashback and Sonic, but you have a lot of mostly lousy games, apparently, because of my track record thus far, so why bother? I do have a Genesis now, CDX, I've had it for a few years, and you know what? There are a lot of really good games on this platform. Instead of just going out and buying whatever games were cheap, word of mouth led me to games like World of Illusion, which is a lot of fun to play with my daughter, Aladdin, which she likes to watch and cheer me on, and Wings of War, an obscure side-scroller that's pretty cool too. Having the right games can make all the difference. With respect to Checkered Flag, yeah, those track edges can be pretty unforgiving. There are other tricks also to increase frame rate consistency, like turning on fog and racing from a distance, probably 5 or 6. Using the manual transmission to keep your speed down, as I mentioned before. This can also make the game a bit more playable. When I play racing games, I usually just mash the accelerator the whole time. That might be one reason why I'm not very good at them, but anyway, the automatic transmission in my playstyle gets you going so fast that, well, it's just bad news. Very, very bad. Thank you for sending that in, Wade and Allison. You can hear both of them on the InverseATASCII podcast at InverseATASCII.info, which I'll include a link to in the show notes. It's one of my favorite podcasts, and Wade does a good job. That is it for this episode. Thank you for joining me and tuning in. Our next episode will be on Alien vs. Predator, followed by Tempest 2000, Kasumi Ninja, and Bubsy in Fractured Furry Tales. You know, I realized after I recorded the last episode that I screwed up my episode order. Going by part number, I should have Hover Strike between Alien vs. Predator and Tempest 2000, but old Hover Strike ended up down there in episode 22. Not sure how that happened. I thought about fixing it, but that would invalidate some of the episode numbers that I've already read off, recorded so far in this podcast, referring to future episodes. So instead, I'm just going to leave it where it is, because in the end, the episode order doesn't really matter all that much. But what does matter is feedback. If you have any stories or memories or thoughts about these upcoming games or anything I've covered so far, or just the Jaguar in general, please send those in, text or audio, to jaguar@gamebygamepodcast.com. All pertinent show links can be found in your favorite web browser at jaguar.gamebygamepodcast.com. There is a new Storytime segment after the break, but if you're not sticking around for that, which is fine, please remember that there is a lot of good out there in this world of ours. Sometimes it's obscured by evil and sadness and pain, but it's always there, always there. So do try to keep an open mind and a joyful heart. Thank you for listening.
And now, story time with Shinto.
I was over at my friend Chewy's house. I think I mentioned in a previous episode that I used to go over to his house and play 2-player games on the original Xbox every week or so. He'd pop up some popcorn with some fancy popcorn seasoning on top, and we'd play a co-op FPS or something. One night he had a new game, Need for Speed Hot Pursuit 2. The gist of this game, if I remember correctly, is that you drive around and flee the police or something like that. Unlike Checkered Flag, this has split-screen co-op, so I was player 2. We were both driving fancy exotic cars, and while he would blow by police cars on the highway, I would actually slow down to the speed limit as I approached a police car. Chewie would yell at me, "What are you doing? You're missing the whole point of the game." And yeah, I guess I was. Too much of a do-gooder to play the game properly, but I kept doing it for a while, slowing down as I passed the cops, and partially because that drove Chewie nuts. Maybe I'm not that much of a do-gooder. Earlier in this episode, when I was talking about the various tracks, I mentioned that I found a place in one of them where I could escape the track, and at least for a little bit, and explore around. That's a very compelling thing to me. It's interesting and fun. I guess that was kind of the point of Club Drive. You could go off exploring if you wanted to. You didn't have to stick on the track. But there were more places I wish I could have gone here in Checkered Flag. The lake or the river, just to see what's out there, even though it probably wasn't rendered. Many years ago, I had a dream that I was playing a video game, a game of pool, or pocket billiards if you prefer. A great physics engine, a 3D pool hall that you could walk around, nice scenery that you could see out the windows. In my dream, in the game, I found that if I hit the pool ball really hard and knocked it off the table, it could poke a hole in the wall. Do that enough times in the same general area, and you could actually get out of the pool hall outside and explore this huge world. It's always an appealing possibility in video games, especially the older ones, exploring out beyond the typical boundaries, seeing what's out in the scenery off in the distance. And it's not just me. Remember the old rumor about playing Battlezone in the arcade, that you could go up around the volcano and explore around the mountains? Kind of like that. And that might be one of the things that I like about Minecraft, a procedurally generated landscape with neat geological features, cliffs and arches and seas and caves and waterfalls, but the blockiness kind of ruins the effect for me. Exploring this world by hopping around everywhere, it wears thin. Besides, if I'm playing Minecraft, at least one of my kids is sitting next to me, building physics-defying fantastical structures. Oh well. I guess just exploring doesn't make much sense for a game unless it's procedurally generated, because that's a lot of work, building an entire world just for one player to wander around. I'm kind of reminded of Dear Esther for the PC. Kind of breaks that mold, but the path you follow is a bit too curated and linear for true boundless exploration. My son and I spent a lot of time trying to go up near a waterfall, but it was just too steep. The game wasn't designed to let you explore there. That was out of bounds. But that's the sort of thing that I would always dream about growing up, playing Adventure on the 2600 or really any number of classic games, exploring past the boundaries, seeing what amazing world is out there. I guess I could have also just gone outside. That's story time for this episode. Thank you for joining me. I'll talk to you again next time.